I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who kept secrets. I used to believe affairs were things that happened to other people, strangers in whispered conversations or characters in messy television dramas. Not me, not my marriage. But the truth is, it didn't start with cheating. It started with loneliness. It started with silence. It started the night I stood outside my husband's office in the pouring rain, shivering in my thin coat, waiting for him to pick me up like he said he would. He was over an hour late. No text, no call. It's just me soaked and invisible on the sidewalk, while the rest of the world rushed past under umbrellas and headlights. I remember checking my phone again and again, my fingers numb, my heart slowly hardening. When the message finally came running late, "Sorry, babe, big meeting." I felt something in me quietly snap, like a thread stretched too thin for too long. I was about to start walking home in the rain when a silver SUV pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, and there he was, Evan. I recognized him from one of Matt's office parties, though I doubt we'd exchanged more than a handful of words. He was the kind of guy who stood out clean-cut, confident, expensive cologne that lingered in the air like a secret. "Need a ride?" he asked, smiling that slow, easy smile of his. I hesitated for half a second, just long enough to remember I was freezing, drenched, and forgotten. I nodded and got in. The heat blasted from the vents, and my fingers tingled as they warmed. He didn't say anything at first, just turned the radio down and glanced over with a polite, almost curious look. "Rough night," he said eventually, his voice low and smooth. I shrugged, gave a tight smile. You could say that. I didn't offer more, and he didn't pry. Instead, he asked if I wanted to stop for a coffee on the way. Just too warm. I should have said no. I wanted to say no. But something in me wanted to sit, to be seen, to be heard, just for a few minutes, so I said yes. We sat in a quiet corner of a cafe just off the highway, steam rising from our cups, rain tapping against the windows. We talked about everything and nothing. About work, weather, podcasts, and how people forget to check in with the ones they love until it's too late. He didn't flirt, not really. But the way he looked at me, like I mattered. So, like I was more than just someone's wife waiting around for scraps of attention, sent a warmth through me that coffee couldn't explain. When he dropped me off, he didn't linger. Just as soft, "It was nice talking to you," and a quick glance that lasted longer than it should have. Then he added, almost casually, "If you ever need anything, I'm around." I remember standing at the door for a full minute after. He left my heart beating just a little faster than usual. When I walked inside, Matt was on the couch, laptop open, phone in hand. "Hey," he said without looking up. "You dry off, okay?" That was it. No apology, no explanation. It's just a distracted question and the clacking of keys. I wanted to tell him I waited for him for over an hour. I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask him when exactly I'd stopped being important to him. But instead, I just said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I went upstairs, changed out of my wet clothes, and lay in bed thinking about Evan's eyes, Evan's voice, Evan's kindness. I didn't do anything wrong, not yet. But I was already lying to Matt, to myself. It's already letting something crack open inside me that I knew I couldn't close. Over the next few days, I kept thinking about that ride, about how nice it felt to be noticed, even for just an hour. Matt didn't ask how I got home. He didn't even notice I'd been gone, longer than usual. We passed each other like shadows in our own home, polite and careful and empty. I told myself I was just being dramatic, just tired, that every marriage goes through phases. But deep down, I knew this was more than a phase. It was a slow unraveling. And Evan, he was a single thread I kept tugging even when I knew better. When he texted me a few days later, "Hope you dried off, still owe you a proper coffee." I stared at the message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could have deleted it, ignored it, pretended it never happened. But I didn't. I typed back, "Rain check sounds nice." Then I hit send. I didn't know it then. But that moment, that single reply would change everything. Asterisk, I didn't mean for it to go any further. After that night, Evan gave me a ride and we shared coffee. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a quiet moment in the middle of a storm, both outside and inside me. But that moment kept replaying in my head like a song I couldn't turn off. And when Evan texted again a few days later, something in me wanted to feel that spark again. I told myself it was harmless. I wasn't doing anything wrong. Was just texting, just talking. Just someone who listened when my husband barely looked up from his laptop anymore. But deep down, I knew. I knew I was drifting, slipping towards something I didn't fully understand. It all escalated at Matt's company barbecue. He begged me to come, even though he knew I hated these kinds of events. Just show up for an hour, he said, while barely making eye contact. It looks good to the team. Not, I want you there. Not, it would mean a lot to me. Just optics. That word stuck in my throat like a bone. Still, I went. I wore a dress I hadn't touched in months. The kind that once made Matt stare at me in ways that made my skin heat. Back when we were younger, when we still had fire. I caught him looking at his phone more than me the whole night. He introduced me to people with a tight smile, then wandered off for work talk while I stood beside a cooler of warm sodas, sipping wine too fast just to feel something. That's when I saw Evan. He wasn't laughing or putting on a show like the rest of them. He was standing off to the side, drink in hand, scanning the crowd until his eyes found me. And when they did, he smiled. Big, not the polite corporate smile everyone wore at these things, but a real one. The kind that made me feel like I wasn't alone in a room full of strangers. He came over without hesitation. You clean up well? He said, his voice low, teasing, like we were already in on something together. I rolled my eyes, but I smiled too. He asked how I'd been, how the week had gone. He didn't ask about Matt. He never did. It was like in his world I existed on my own, not as someone's wife, not as someone fading into the background. That night after the barbecue, I couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he leaned in close when he spoke, the quiet way he touched my lower back when we parted. I felt guilty for how much I noticed, guilty for how alive it made me feel. Evan didn't text right away, and I was ashamed of how much I waited for it. When it finally came, it was short. Next time, I'm stealing you for a drink alone. I told myself I shouldn't respond. I told myself this was playing with fire. But fire was the only thing that cut through the numbness anymore. So I wrote back, you'll have to try harder than that. The next week, we met for coffee again, and this time it wasn't just about catching up. The tension between us was sharp, electric. I laughed too much. He touched my hand too long when passing me a napkin. And then, as we walked to my car, he stopped me with a soft touch on my arm. I looked up. There it was. That pause, that pull. His hand moved to my cheek, tentative, almost asking permission. And when he kissed me, it wasn't rushed, wasn't clumsy, was slow, like he had all the time in the world to savor me. I kissed him back. I wish I could say I resisted. I wish I could say I felt nothing, but I did. I felt everything. My heart pounded so loud I couldn't hear my thoughts. When we finally pulled apart, we didn't speak. Just stood there, eyes locked, breathing. Fast, he stepped back first. You okay? He asked gently. I nodded, but I wasn't. I was spinning. I drove home in silence, hands shaking on the steering wheel. Every streetlight cast strange shadows. Every red light felt like judgment. When I walked in, Matt was on the couch, typing away on his laptop. He barely looked up. Hey, he mumbled. Dinner's in the fridge. No hug, no kiss, not even a second glance. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching him. This was the man I'd built a life with. The man who once used to stay up talking with me until sunrise, who used to surprise me with flowers just because. Where had that man gone? I went upstairs and sat on the edge of our bed, Evan's kiss still on my lips, my stomach twisting with guilt. But guilt and desire, they don't cancel each other out. They just live side by side, gnawing at you until one wins. And I think even then, I already knew which one would. The next day, Evan sent another message. Still thinking about that kiss. You have no idea what you're doing to me? My hands trembled as I typed back. I think I do. I didn't know what was happening to me. Felt like I was watching my own life from the outside, unable to stop the crash I saw coming. But for the first time in years, I felt wanted. Tolerated, not ignored, wanted. And that feeling, it's dangerous. It's addictive. And it was only the beginning. I wish I could say I stopped before it got out of hand. I wish I could say I came to my senses and turned back while there was still time to salvage what was left of my marriage. But the truth, I didn't want to stop. The guilt was there, yes, thick. Choking, always present in the quiet moments, but it wasn't enough to outweigh the way Evan made me feel. With him, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't a chore or a background character in my own life. I was a woman who still had something to give, something to feel. The day we crossed the final line started like any other. Matt left early for work, barely muttering a goodbye as he grabbed his coffee and keys. I stayed in bed a while longer, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it meant that I no longer cried over him. My phone buzzed. Evan, can I see you today? 3 words that sent a heat rushing through me and a sick twist through my stomach. I should have said no, but I didn't. That afternoon, we met at a small hotel just outside the city. Was tucked between a gas station and a row of trees, discreet and quiet. I remember standing outside the room, hand trembling as I knocked, heart pounding like I was about to jump off a cliff. Evan opened the door, and the way he looked at me like he'd been starving, and I was the only thing that could satisfy him, made the world fall away. What happened between us wasn't just lust. It was need, hunger, aching vulnerability wrapped in sweat and whispered promises. It was frantic and slow, soft and intense, a mess of limbs and emotion I hadn't felt in years. And when it was over, when we lay tangled in the sheets, catching our breath, he traced lazy circles on my shoulder and said, I've wanted this since the day I saw you. Okay. And I believed him. But after that, something shifted. It wasn't just about sneaking kisses or secret meetings anymore. It started to feel real, too real. I found myself lying to Matt more easily than I should have been able to. I stopped pretending I wasn't checking my phone every 10 minutes, waiting for Evan's name to pop up. I even started making excuses not to go to events with Matt Klimming. Headaches, work calls, anything I could think of. And the worst part? He didn't even push back. He never questioned me. In fact, he seemed almost relieved, like my absence gave him more room to breathe. I should have seen that as a red flag. I should have wondered what he was doing with all that space. One night, Evan invited me over to his place, said his roommate was out of town and we'd have the place to ourselves. We ordered takeout, drank wine, curled up on his couch, like a real couple. For a few hours, I let myself pretend that was who we were, that I wasn't cheating, that my husband wasn't waiting at home, that none of this was tangled and broken. But then I saw something small, but sharp. Like a splinter you don't notice until it's lodged deep in your skin. A photo on a shelf. Evan, smiling, with his arm around a woman I recognized, not from real life, but from Instagram. Matt's coworker, one I'd seen tagged in pictures from office parties. Her name was Lauren. My stomach dropped. I pointed at the frame. Is that your ex-wife? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Evan's expression flickered just for a second. Then he nodded. Yeah, that's Lauren. We split last year. He said it casually, too casually, like the words were rehearsed. My instincts screamed. Something was off. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept scrolling through Lauren's Instagram, my chest tightening with every swipe. The pictures didn't add up. She wasn't acting like someone recently divorced. In fact, her captions were still full of love and shared memories. Even more damning, I found a recent post just 2 weeks ago, company gala. Matt was in it. So was Lauren. But the one holding her waist, smiling like they belonged together, was Evan. I sat up in bed, shaking. I went further back. There. They were Ogden vacations, dinners, couple selfies, no mention of a breakup, no trace of separation. I checked the comments. Friends still referring to them as a couple. No one acting like she was single. My heart pounded in my ears. I called. Evan. No answer. I texted, "We need to talk now." He called back minutes later, and I didn't waste time. "You're still with her," I said flatly. "Aren't you?" There was a pause, and then a sigh. "It's complicated," he said. "Hung up before." I could scream, but it didn't stop there. I needed answers, and I needed the truth. I confronted Matt the next day. I told him I'd found pictures. I asked why he and Lauren were in them so close. His face drained of color. That was all the confirmation I needed. He didn't deny it. Didn't even seem surprised. "It just happened," he mumbled. "We were drunk at a conference. I didn't plan it." I stared at him, stunned. "How long?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. That silence was louder than any confession. My knees nearly gave out. We had both been cheated on. We had both cheated. We were both drowning in lies, and the most bitter part. It wasn't even just about betrayal. It was about the slow decay that came before it. The neglect. The quiet exits. The years of not trying. I realized then that Evan and I were just mirror images of what had already broken. Our affair didn't cause the collapse, just revealed how far we'd already fallen. I used to think betrayal had to shape something sharp and sudden. A wound you could point to and say, "This is where it all went wrong." But the truth is, sometimes betrayal is slow. Sometimes it's quiet. A look not shared, a door not opened, a moment ignored. By the time Matt and I admitted what we'd done to each other, the house was already ashes. We were just finally breathing in the smoke. After that night, after the truth about Evan and Lauren and Matt came pouring out, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the carpet, feeling like someone had taken my entire life and drained the color from it. Matt tried to explain. He used words like mistake and slipped up, but I couldn't listen. Because the truth was, we had both been slipping for years. We just landed in different beds. For the next few days, we moved around each other, like ghosts. We were too exhausted to fight, too numb to pretend. Every morning we exchanged cold greetings in the kitchen like coworkers forced to share a cubicle. Every night we lay on opposite sides of the bed like strangers in a hotel room. I kept replaying everything in my head, how we got here, how long we ignored the cracks, how Evan wasn't who I thought he was. That part cut the deepest. Because for a while I believed in him. I believed I mattered to him. And even after everything, a part of me still wanted to hear from him. To hear him say it wasn't all fake, and what we had, however wrong, meant something. But his silence was an answer too. It wasn't until I ran into Lauren in person that everything really unraveled. I was at the grocery store, wandering, the frozen food aisle like a zombie, when I heard someone say my name. I turned, and there she was, Lauren, beautiful and composed, wearing a look that was hard to read. Not anger, not kindness, just cold, calm calculation. "I know everything," she said. "I know about you and Evan, and I know Matt told you about us." I opened my mouth to speak, but she held up a hand. "Don't bother, just listen," and I did. For the next few minutes, she laid it all out. Evan hadn't just lied about their relationship status. He'd lied about everything. They were never separated, never on a break. In fact, they'd just signed a lease on a new apartment 2 weeks before I met him for coffee. He had used me, played me, and when I started asking questions, he went silent because he didn't want Lauren to find out. "He's done this before," she said. "You're not the first. It's just the most recent." And then she walked away, heels clicking against the tile, leaving me standing there with frozen peas in my hand and a heart full of shame. That night, I didn't go home. I drove around for hours, ending up in a quiet parking lot by the water. I sat in my car staring out at the lake, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. The betrayal wasn't just about the lies. It was about how easily I'd abandoned myself. How I let loneliness turn into recklessness. How I let another man's attention convince me I was still whole. I realized then that I'd been looking for something outside myself, validation, love, purpose, when all along I needed to face what was broken inside. When I finally walked through our front door just past midnight, Matt was on the couch, TV on mute, drink in his hand. He looked at me like he wanted to say something. I sat across from him, and for the first time in weeks, we actually talked. Really talked. No blame, no yelling, just honesty. He told me he'd been unhappy for a long time. That work became his escape because he didn't know how to be around me anymore. I told him I felt invisible, unwanted, forgotten. We both cried. Not because we were still in love, but because we finally saw each other for what we were to people who had loved once. Deeply, but had let that love starve for so no. Long it turned bitter. In the end, we made the decision together. A calm, mutual ending. No dramatic exits, no broken dishes. Just a quiet agreement that we deserved more than what we'd become. We agreed to separate, sell the house, start over. It wasn't easy. Saying goodbye to 10 years of shared life never is. But there was peace in it, too, a kind of relief. Like we'd both been holding our breath for so long and finally let it out. As for Evan, I never saw him again. He sent one last text days later. "I'm sorry. Never meant to hurt you." I didn't respond, because whatever he meant, he did hurt me. And I'd already spent too much time clinging to people who only saw pieces of me. I needed to learn how to be whole on my own. It's been 6 months now. I moved into a small apartment across town. I'm taking a class, learning how to paint, something I always said I'd do someday. I go on long walks. I cook for myself. I've learned how to be quiet without being lonely. And sometimes, when I look back on that night in the rain, Evan first pulled up in his car and offered me a ride. I wonder what would have happened if I'd just said no. But then I realized everything that followed, as painful as it was, showed me exactly what I needed to see. I had lost myself in a marriage, in a man, in the idea of being chosen. Now, I choose me.